Welcome back to another episode of Gym Goss. And we are going to be talking all about fitness taboos today. And you're here with myself, Jacob, Sam, and Jackson. Welcome, boys.
What's up?
Hello.
All right. So there's a lot of things in the fitness industry that aren't often spoken about, at least not publicly. And today we thought it'd be a good idea to address those topics head on, where most podcasters or fitness folk would sidestep, dodge, duck, and weave these kind of topics or avoid completely answering these questions. So Jackson, let's get straight into it. You suggested we start with the question, would you date someone who doesn't go to the gym? Jackson?
I was asking the question. I didn't think I was going to have to answer it first.
Well, do you date, Jackson? Are you dating? I know that all of your followers want to know at the moment. Are you single? Are you dating? Are you hetero, metro, bi, homosexual? What's your story, mate?
I'd love to say that I'm dating, but that would just be a flat out lie. I don't leave my house too much. So yeah, me and Ryu, the Canggu eligible bachelors at the moment, and
Mrs. Palmer and her 5 daughters are getting a heavy workout.
Nah.
That's a flat out lie. You're turning bright red, bro.
I'm just thinking. I was going to make a comment on where my testosterone levels are at. Counter your point.
How's the libido?
A lot of that isn't happening.
So dating people who don't go to the gym.
Yeah. Okay. So on face value, you say, yeah, sure. You don't have to go. You don't have to go to the gym for me to date you. But then, if I think about it a little bit more deeply, I think the issues would arise from a clashing of values between me and the other person. So, for example, if someone doesn't go to the gym, they're probably not going to value health as much as I do, potentially. Probably not going to value taking care of themselves as much. That's one part of it. The second part of it would be a clashing of lifestyle. So depending on how far you want to take your fitness or physique goals, a lot of the time it's going to mean restraint surrounding social occasions and eating. And for someone who doesn't go to the gym or isn't familiar with those behaviors, I think they might struggle to grasp the idea of why you can't go out for a date or why you can't have a couple of wines that night, things like that. And then thirdly, I think someone that goes to the gym, it shows that they are able to, well, number one, they want to work on themselves. And number two, it shows that they can commit and stick to something regularly for an extended period of time. And I think that they are values that I would seek in a partner.
Samuel, what are your thoughts? I know that obviously you met your lovely fiance, Kayla, at the gym. So that's sort of, yes, symbiotic care.
That's right.
So talk to us. What do you think?
Do they need to train? Probably not. Like, I definitely think that there would be a clash in lifestyle if you're like trying to pursue a relationship with someone who doesn't train. But I definitely think it's like beneficial to have your own thing and to do your own thing, and you don't have to be in each other's pockets. It's like Kayla and I don't train together. She's not in the gym I don't even see her train half the time. But it's more a matter of like trying to be better for yourself and actually caring about challenging yourself and being better and improving your health. So I think it's not important that they lift weights necessarily, but some sort of physical activity or some sort of, training or sport or anything that really challenges them. But in saying that, maybe they don't appreciate your muscle and all the gains that you have. Like, I don't know, maybe they just don't care as much. Or if you want to do more specific things, you want to compete in bodybuilding, powerlifting, any physique related sport, or you're doing a dieting phase, I think that's where it's going to clash more. Maybe they're not going to get it as much. We see it all the time. How often do family members or friends, they go, oh, just have a piece of pizza when you're dieting, or, why can't they just don't get it. There's a bit of like a disconnect between, as Jackson said, like your values and theirs. As I guess if you can overcome that, then yeah, good luck to you.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there needs to be obviously some mutual alignment of, I guess, experience and goals, interests and whatever, if you're pursuing bodybuilding, powerlifting, because the person will need to have some level of empathy. But I think, Jackson, all the points you raised in relation to, someone committing to something, taking care of themselves, interested in health and having similar values, I think that fundamentally boils down to the person being driven, having their own interests and prioritizing self-development. And I think you can do all those things without having to go to the gym necessarily. And I've dated people on both sort of ends of the spectrum in terms of not into fitness.
You've dated every type of female that exists, Jacob.
And male.
True. And male, yeah. Only one.
Don't discriminate.
That's right. But you could be not into fitness at all, and then so far into fitness where I think that causes more problems if you have two people who are so into their fitness, because you then have two people, for example, let's say they're bodybuilders, influencers, whatever, that too into fitness kind of category is, where that can cause a lot of, I guess, tension and clashing also, because you've got two people who are so heavily focused on themselves, so highly driven to develop themselves, that the relationship can't really function, because you've got these two people who are just completely detached because they're so worried about themselves. So I think that can be problematic as well. And for those kind of people, I think it might even be beneficial to have someone who is not as much into fitness or not into fitness at all, because they get the room to go off and do their thing without having to sort of compete with that person, provided their partner understands. But I think, yes, I'm not going to give any relationship advice, but I have definitely experienced both sides of that coin. And right now, my preference would be someone who's not into fitness anywhere near as much, because I go to work, all I do is fitness. The last thing I want to come home and do is have someone start fucking talking about their macros, start talking about their training, start asking me questions about, hey, should I do this? Should I do that? Fuck that. I'm sorry. I go home. I want to switch off. I don't want to be, answering more questions and coaching somebody else, essentially. So I think
you want to talk about the episode on euphoria. That's what you want to talk about.
Pretty much. I want to talk about normal things, and I've gotten to that point in my life where I don't want to live, fitness 24/7. I want to have a life outside of fitness. And it's really important for me, at least, to be able to come home and, have normal conversations that aren't fitness, training, diet related. And that makes me more interested in fitness, and to be able to, I guess, pursue that without sort of it becoming this ongoing 24/7 just energy zapping thing. But that's obviously my specific case. Any thoughts or comments there?
I tend to agree, and I'll spice up the conversation a bit. Like, even though I'll shit on everyone that goes and does F45 as their predominant form of like training for attempted physique development, my ideal girl probably is just doing a few F45 classes a week and a couple of beach walks. Like that's probably the reality. And if it's too far on the other end of the spectrum, like a bikini competitor, it's just that's probably going to be massive trouble. Now, I'm not throwing stones from a glass house here. Like I understand that people wouldn't want to date me for those exact same fucking reasons, and I'm cool with that. But yeah, it's if you've got two people highly fixated on
F45 classes.
Mate, with my physique, I could roll into one of those and fit right in.
Might not be able to keep up.
I'd love to see you do a burpee, Jackson.
My anaerobic threshold is 0 at the moment.
I want you to post a video of you doing a burpee on your stories after this airs.
I can't. Doctor says no exercise. Still,
Burpees are functional.
I forgot what I'm talking about now.
All right, we'll move on. We'll move on to the next questions.
Yeah.
All
okay.
right. So, all right. Well, this one ties in. Are the best bodybuilders and athletes also the most selfish? Because that kind of ties into the discussion of.
That was the sort of point that I was touching on. It's like if you're both on the same end of the spectrum when it comes to fitness, to succeed at that, you are going to have to be quite selfish, in the sense that when it comes to prioritizing what you eat, when you eat, when you train, where you train, when you sleep, and the social engagements that you commit to, all is predicated on self first. That's the primary considerations. And I think if you've got two people in the same relationship, both doing that, then it's going to cause a lot of friction. But yeah, that was just to close off that previous point.
Yeah, I agree. So are the best bodybuilders or athletes also the most selfish? Do you need to be extremely selfish to excel at a high level of sport?
I know a lot of people who are really selfish and fail.
But still, the best ones are selfish.
Yeah.
There's exceptions to the rule, but the rule is selfish. The best of the selfish.
But is it a selfishness, or is it that the people around them also acknowledge that their goal has these certain requirements and they're willing to make those sacrifices? So those people are also, it's like not them just being entirely selfish. The other people are being selfless to a degree.
I think the individual has chosen to take a selfish route, and the people around them have been okay to take a backwards seat. And that happens with relationships like all the time.
But if the other people are willing to do that, are you being selfish? Because
I think the person
they're not making a sacrifice necessarily.
I think they chose to be selfish before they had people around them.
Okay, so the question becomes, what is selfish about pursuing a high degree of sport? Like, what makes it a selfish endeavor?
The overall time requirements.
Like, what are the things that you have to do to make it selfish? You have to be obviously focused on yourself, but you could be an absolute genetic freak and just rock up to your training sessions, do the bare minimum. And as we see with a lot of AFL players, especially, for example, Ben Cousins is a prime example, springs to mind. He was just a freak. He could, go out, party all weekends, come to a game and crush it. That could be said to be selfish as well. But there are athletes in various sports who don't necessarily need to be selfish. But I guess what are the things that they have to do that make it selfish? If we talk about bodybuilding, I can see the answer's a lot more obvious, because, you have to starve yourself. You have to obviously avoid social situations. You're very limited with your time and the things you can do, because you are starving yourself, for contest preparation, basically. But is that just bodybuilding, or is it a blanket rule for other sports?
So the way I see it when it comes to like grasping this concept of being selfish in a sporting endeavor, is like each person has a fixed amount of time within their day, and they can allocate that in different directions. Now, selfish to me means the maximum proportion that you're willing of that day or that time investment that you're willing to invest towards that sporting endeavor. So that might mean how you eat, when you train, how you recover, all those things that could be filling it completely. But then when you start adding social events or seeing family members or missing a training session, that amount, that investment starts going less and less, and all of a sudden it's I guess it's not being selfish, because it's difficult. It's difficult.
I think like particularly for
choices, isn't it?
I think for bodybuilding, like particularly, that it's like a sport where, like, let's say your sessions take 2 hours, and like we all know 2 hours is probably a pretty long time for a training session. 2 hours a day, call it 6 days a week, total training time is 12 hours. You know, that's your total training for a week. You compare 12 hours of training, maybe you have steps, let's say all up 15, call it 20 hours, right? Total time. Compare that to like other sports where you go off and you can train morning and night multiple times because the total demand on the body is a lot lower, and you can just, like the repetition, like basketball where they're playing multiple games a week, right? Training multiple hours a day. And then they go in the gym and doing other things, you know, traveling. I think bodybuilding is probably, it's only selfish because of the diet component. Like the training's not that selfish. I think it's like a low involvement.
Blurring the lines between like commitment versus like being selfish.
So selfish is by definition a lack of concern or consideration for other people, where you're only worried about yourself, right? So, or for your own pleasure or profit. That's like the definition that I put up here. So if you can do your sport, but you can still be considerate of others, and let's say it's not just for pleasure, because we know that, you know, there is some element of pleasure in entertaining a high level of sport, but let's say the profit also you're doing it because it puts food on the table for your family, right? And, you know, supports others, it becomes less selfish. It becomes almost necessity, and it becomes selfless at that point. If you're putting yourself through all of this, you know, physical and mental, you know, hard work to, you know, excel, and you're constantly pushing yourself to be better, and all the things that come with that, like pressure, stress, injury, all that kind of thing. If you're doing it with somebody else in mind, and other people are reaping the rewards of that, it could be argued that it's quite a selfless thing, for example. No doubt there are elements that are selfish, and you can look at it at a global level from the decision to pursue that sport. Is it just for you, or is it just for others? And then you can also look at it during the facilitation of all the tasks within the sport, and how selfish or selfless you are during the process of actioning out all of the things like training, your diet, your recovery, and all that kind of stuff. Because it could be a selfless decision from the onset. You could be saying, hey, I'm going to do this because I got to do this for my family, right? Because I got to put food on the table, and this is, you know, what I'm good at. I got to do it. So it's actually selfless. Or and then you could be really selfish in the way that you action it out, and just like not worry about anyone else, and just do it because you're doing this selfless thing. Or you could do it alternatively. You could do it very selfishly and say, I'm just going to do this for me, right? Because this is what I want. I get a lot of profit and pleasure out of this. But during the process, you could be quite selfless and still think about other people. You know, consider others while you're doing it. Try to, you know, help, educate, you know, teach other people. You know, donate some of your profits and things like that. Care about charity, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's quite a complex thing in and of itself. But I think, yeah, there's two important sort of ways that we need to sort of frame that, you know, I guess, lack of concern for others. At the first level is like the decision to do the thing in the first place. And then the second level is during the doing of that thing, are you worried about others or just yourself?
I want to make a point to show why I'm struggling with the clarity of this concept. So let's say we have two people, two bodybuilders, and it's coming up to their anniversary with their girlfriends. And one of the bodybuilders decides that they won't go to do an anniversary date and have a meal off and have some wine with their partner, because they want to stay committed to the bodybuilding goal. Now, the other bodybuilder, he chooses to go and have a nice anniversary dinner and have some wines and break the diet. Now, who's the more selfish person? Because the bodybuilder who chose to have the date, it's probably still a selfish motivation because he knows that he's going to enjoy that and he's going to enjoy the sensation of making his partner happy. Whereas the other bodybuilder, it's still a selfish, or it's still a selfish motivation because he's just valuing the extra potential progression in the bodybuilding pursuit. It still seems like a selfish motivation on either end, but one is viewed a lot more selfish than the other.
I think everything we inherently do is selfish to a degree because we're all self-serving, and everything you do is always, at some point, I always like say this to people, like every single decision we make, somewhere along the line, we justified it as being like the right decision, at least for us.
Yeah. Post hoc rationalization.
Yeah. Well, you're never going to make a decision inherent like that you think is wrong. And if you go back and say, well, that was the wrong decision, at the time you thought there was some justification to make that decision, which made it right. You know what I mean? It's weird to think.
And I also think other people can do the same when they're making a decision as to whether or not they think something is selfish or not. They're looking at that with their own biases and, predetermined, judgment and like value systems that they're going to be, using to come to some form of conclusion as to whether or not this is selfish or not. But I think at the end of the day, it's like whether or not this is even a useful question to answer. It only really depends on the person. It's only a question worth considering for both the person who's involved in, pursuing a high level of sport and the people around them. And at the end of the day, if it's not affecting anyone in any meaningful way, it's like, what's the point of fucking even worrying about it, right? Yeah. It's like, if people accept it, that you're being selfish to do this thing, whether or not they think it's selfish, is important because they're affected by it. And, it's the same for that individual. But anyone outside of that close network of people who are affected by that person, pursuing their sport, it really doesn't matter if, they're selfish or not.
Yeah. To me, like in the context of this question, being selfish for a sporting or competitive endeavor would be when a person selectively avoids anything that has the potential to interfere with that sporting or competitive goal.
Yeah. Even despite the potential benefit it might have for other people. If it's going to detriment their pursuit of the sport, they're not interested. I think that's necessary to some degree to excel at a high level of sport. But I also think, if we talk about, the purpose of excelling at a high level of sport, it's like, you don't want to step on so many toes throughout the process of achieving all these great things that at the end of your career, you've got fucking no one and nothing, right? Left over.
Athletes are like that.
I know they are. And, that's something I think it's a decision the person needs to make. And if they make it knowingly, then again, who cares? It's like, if that's what, they have to do in order to get there, that's on them. That's their prerogative. But I think a lot of athletes probably need to consider these kind of things, especially when they're like lower level athletes, amateur athletes who are pursuing sport. Like a bodybuilding show, it's their first show. They're doing like, ICN bikini first timers or whatever. Like, they need to be aware that they don't need to have the same level of selfishness as, a pro. And they don't need to be like Kai Green, who lives on his own, doesn't interact with anyone, to be the best bodybuilder he can. It's like, they don't need to do that. They can't do that. If they do that, they're not going to profit and benefit from the sport in the way that Kai Green does. And they're going to wind up at the end of the day with, a lot more problems than, being selfish solved. Mm-hmm. Interesting question. Very good.
I think in summary, there is an element to excel at a high level in a sport. There's a time,
or in anything, there's costs involved,
and they often come you know, there's sacrifices that need to be made by other people in order for you to pursue those things.
Like you think about Steve Jobs, for example, like that guy
Perfect
obviously,
example.
you
What I
know,
was thinking of.
was on the spectrum, you know, in many regards. You know, not very socially, you know, proficient or even competent, from, you know, all reports. But he, you know, did what he had to do. He was, you know, just ruthless in how he pursued what he wanted to do, and very unforgiving during his, you know, interpersonal relationships. You know, if people didn't support or get on board behind what he wanted, and look at what he achieved. So, yeah, I think it depends on the context, because I'm sure in some industries, like that level of, I guess, you know, savageness towards others, you wouldn't, you know, excel. You just wouldn't build relationships, networks, you know, create a culture that would thrive. Like that wouldn't work. But in his situation, it did. But yes, I think fundamentally some level of selfishness and being self-absorbed is needed to be good at anything.
I just
All
want
right.
to add I just want to add a quick
Okay,
fact on. I was thinking about Steve Jobs, that whole question response, but I wasn't going to bring him up. But now that you've baited it, so like Steve and his story was a big motivation for me, like moving out to live by myself and like isolating to have time to like really think a lot without distractions. And for those who don't know, when Steve was in his come up period, he got he had a child, Lisa, a daughter, and when he was given the news that I forget the lady's name was pregnant, he basically just told her that he refuses to have anything to do with this child because it does not fit in his current plans and timelines. Now, for 10 years, he refused to acknowledge Lisa as his daughter, and she had
Except he
biological.
named one of his computers after.
Yeah, his systems. Yeah, she had the biological testing done. That's not the right word for it, but
DNA test.
You know,
DNA thing, that basically like confirmed that she was his child, and he basically did a reanalysis of like standard deviations and error margins to show that there could be this many thousand people in the United States that could also be this person's father. And for 10 years, he just said, listen, like this is a deviation to my goal, and I'm not willing to go down that road, so I'm just going to exclude it. And that is sort of the end. When I consider being selfish, that is the end of the spectrum. But it's like, would he have been as successful as he was if he was less selfish? Probably not. And he was probably quite a sad, miserable person for a lot of the time, and a lot of people hated him. But he was also debatably the most successful entrepreneur of all time. So
yeah, like his relentless pursuit of, you know, his own goals just came at the cost of so many other things, even family, a daughter.
It's just refusing to let anything interfere with the primary goal. That's what selfish means to me.
And I think at a basic level, it's like the less trade-offs you make if you think about it, instead of being selfish, it's like the less trade-offs you make to prioritize time, energy, and effort into things that aren't the one domain that you want to push forward. It's like you could arguably say that they're going to interrupt your progress, and that if you want to be the best at something, you got to put all your eggs in that basket and, you know, drive it forward as best you can. So on that note, Jackson, is it okay to skip leg day?
Jackson skips every day, so
I know what, I don't want to steal Sam's answer, so I'm going to try to come at it from a different direction. Okay, I'll be like devil's advocate to some degree. So training legs is generally the most difficult session that you'll have to complete within your weight training routine. Now, if you are just completing weights as your only form of exercising, you're not engaging with any sort of formal sport, I think it can be valuable to experience that level of discomfort regularly. Now, what I've noticed a lot recently in the fitness industry with the promotion of RIR-based training and a lot of shaming around training to failure and things like that is this overall pussification of the industry, where people are just getting more and more afraid to push their limits in the gym. Now, in terms of when it comes to the capacity to be able to endure discomfort, it comes with training, and sort of the term is used a lot, callousing your mind. It's when you sort of undergo this level of discomfort consistently for a long time, your tolerance of that same discomfort improves. Now, I think there is value to having elements of really difficult training inside your routine for that primary purpose of callousing your mind and building tolerance to discomfort. Because if you ever down the line decide that you have lofty aspirations in any domain, there's going to be a lot of resistance near the top. It doesn't matter if it's a physical aspiration or a business or a business aspiration, there's going to be resistance at the top, and you are going to have to engage or persist through that discomfort to be able to break through that threshold. And if you haven't had to practice with that, then I think you're going to be quite shocked and unaccustomed to that sensation and not have the tools to know how to deal with that.
I'll write that answer, Samuel.
Yeah, legs is definitely one of the hardest sessions. Like sometimes my mindset when it comes to training legs is I get through leg day and then I have 2 days off or 3 days off training nearly effectively until my next leg session, even though in between it's like 2 upper body sessions. Do you need to train legs? Not necessarily. The reality is for some people, it's just not a priority. It's just not, it just doesn't fit within their goals. For them, that would be taking away from what they actually want to do. Like I've got clients who, one client in particular, he's like 6'4", he just fucking hates training legs. He's got like a fused ankle and he just doesn't enjoy it. Even though there's some exercises he can do, you know, like leg extensions or leg curls, he can do those, no worries. He just doesn't want to do them. Now, obviously, from a coaching standpoint, we try and encourage people to do everything and to try and develop their whole physique, because the reality is, you know, it's probably more advantageous in the long run to develop the whole physique, try and build full body strength, you know, have the capacity to be able to do these things. And you know what, it's also good to have a bit more of a challenge, you know. Everyone knows upper body is like fun to train. It's like enjoyable to get like an arm pump or something. And sometimes you need to like really push the boundaries. Jackson, you're muted.
What, Emma?
Yeah. I couldn't hear you.
I'm not muted.
I couldn't hear what you said anyway.
I forgot what one of those feels like.
Yeah. Just get a finger pump from the keyboard.
Yeah.
But do you need, like, there's a lot of shaming about not training legs.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that's wrong. Like, because context matters. Some people just don't want to. And everyone should just do their thing, you know? It's 2022. People can't be shamed for anything anymore. So you shouldn't shame people for skipping leg day.
And sometimes to be honest, there's legitimate reasons for not training your legs.
Yeah, I think
capacity or aesthetic capacity.
Yeah.
It's like men's physique. You probably don't want to be too bottom heavy. And like a lot of genetically gifted people can be really large in the bottom half, and they probably want to balance that out. You know? So it's not even a fact of like, I don't want to complete those exercises. It's just, I'm trying to reshape the overall physique.
Yeah, agreed. I think like not being able to train a body part it's probably like a slightly different, like it's not being able to and choosing not to when you are able to. They're kind of like, obviously we're not going to hate on people and they've got a broken leg or they're injured and can't, but it's more like the people who it's like, oh, you can, but you're choosing not to. Therefore, you know, you're, you know, insert insult here. But I don't think you need to. It's like, I know you're muted, Jacob, but I know some people who are also so developed in their legs that they just don't need to train legs. You know what I mean?
That's me, for example. Like, I could not train my legs and I've still got, pretty decent wheels.
Yeah, but
I
you
think
also trained legs for a decade.
Yeah,
So,
but even if I don't train them for extended periods, like they're still decent. I think the shaming of not training legs or skipping leg day is wrong, especially when it highlights some muscular imbalances based on an aesthetic ideal. I think that only serves, more body image related disorders, more, self-comparison and all this kind of stuff that's just not doing anyone any favors. But I agree that you don't have to train legs if you've got a valid reason and you've made that decision to not train legs and you're going to stick to it. Now, if you're somebody who says, I'm going to train legs, and you have legs in your program, I think the issue becomes when you skip leg day or you perform it semi-regularly after having decided that you're going to do it, because then you're not committing to what you said you were going to do. And then that is, I think, opens up the gateway to, excuses essentially, and being, flaky with your overall, commitment to what you've said you're going to do. And it's like, no one is making anybody do anything really. This isn't Russia or, North Korea, where people are being forced to do things they don't want to do, in fear of anything. It's like, these are choices we make. So if somebody decides, from the start of their training program, hey, I'm going to train legs, they train legs for a couple of weeks and then they skip it because it's hard. Or they only do it when it's easy, or they only do it when they feel right. I think that's when people shouldn't skip leg day, and it's not okay. Mm-hmm. But I think if you have a valid reason, you made the decision not to train your legs, you don't have to train your legs. But I think, the issue is the lack of commitment and the taking the easy route, essentially, because we know, as Jackson said, leg day is hard. And if you're only going to do leg day when all the stars align and you're feeling fantastic, but you skip it when, you're feeling tired, stressed, or, a little bit sore, whatever the case may be, and you don't develop that grit and, the fortitude to be able to push through something challenging despite not feeling amazing, I think that's problematic for all the downstream, I guess, consequences and drawbacks that has, and how that can filter into other areas of your training. Cutting a set out, skipping an exercise, leaving extra reps in the tank, cheating on your diet, or, doing other things that are similar in nature to avoiding doing something that is difficult because it's difficult and you don't feel up to the challenge. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, agree.
All right, next question. Where are we?
I thought of a good one as well that we can maybe add later if we have time.
We'll hit this one. Is it okay to calling people out in fitness, benefits and downsides?
I fucking hate those people. Absolute cunts they are.
Jackson is, up there with Wayne Norton now for, calling people out. I love it.
Call out culture.
Yeah, call out culture in fitness. Is it okay?
Yes, I think so. Because there's a fuckload of people out there who just put out bad information, exhibit malpractice. They just don't, and they get so much support, so much attention. They make money, and like people buy into that shit. And it's not to say that the people necessarily calling them out are always experts, but it's like, fuck, if it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, quacks like a duck, fucking it's a duck, right? Like, how many people do you need to say someone's doing, this thing, or, this is the experience I had with a coach, right? And they fuck up a client before something actually happens and, they stop, or they actually have to change their ways. Like, there's a lot of coaches, we've had heaps of clients, Jacob, who they come through and they've come from other coaches, and just horror stories. It's fucking bad.
The way I see it, I've got a few different comments to make here, but I'll just make one firstly. It's like, if people came to the streets of Melbourne and started causing mayhem, pissing in the streets and stealing shit from shops and just being a nuisance to the community and having a negative impact on the community, the fucking police come and they tase the bastards or fine them or do something. And that is a reason for people to stop what they're doing and a reason for others to not engage in those behaviors as well. Now, in the fitness industry, who have we got doing that? No one. So it has to be done by someone, and it has to be done by the people within the fitness industry. So I do think that people need to speak up when they see bullshit, because otherwise it just goes unchecked. It continues to plague and expand throughout the industry like a fucking disease. And then people stay confused, they don't improve, and our industry, instead of progressing as it could be, we wade through the mud, so to speak.
I completely agree. I think the lack of regulation in the fitness industry makes it quite unique, and therefore there is a great degree of, I guess, ownership on individuals within the fitness industry to do something about it. And I like the analogy of the police and criminal legislation, and say the judicial system, and how that works in society. I like that as being analogous to, people are deterred, right, via the legal system and the various sanctions we put in place for different things, not to do them. We have someone enforcing when rules and laws are broken. However, in the fitness industry, I think, we need to be cognizant that, similar to the legal system, different degrees of, I guess, criminal behavior receive, varying levels of punishment, right? It's not the same level of punishment for everything. If you steal a candy bar, you're not going to get the same level of punishment as you would if you murdered someone. And I think the issue on social media now is that everybody is getting punished for the same, or in the same way, for different levels of, say, mis or disinformation, right? Like they're getting called out, bashed, name called, so on and so forth. Now, if you're a repeat offender and you have a large following, and the magnitude of the misinformation is quite large, then the degree of punishment should be really high. But if you're an influencer who doesn't really know, you're just putting up what you do, for example, and you've got a moderately, size following, it's like, do you need that same level of, call out culture as a person with a massive following who's deliberately bastardizing the science and using pseudoscience to sell a product? Probably not. Maybe a private message, say, hey, I'm an expert in this area, and I noticed you doing this. Just wanted to give you some advice. I think that's a more appropriate way to call somebody out. And I think that's where the issue lies. I definitely think that we need some form of, I guess, social means of monitoring the content information that people put out on social media. But I think that there really needs to be a lot more consideration around how we go about it. Like, people can have their reputation destroyed. People can, suffer all kind of mental health illness, issues if, somebody calls them out and they receive a lot of hate and people coming at them, from that person's following and stuff like that. Like, that's not good. Like, that's not good for anyone. Sure, it might deter them, but at what cost? Like, I think there needs to be a lot more consideration around how people are calling individuals out in the fitness industry, and also just being self-aware of the way that they approach calling that person out. Try to speak to them directly first. If that fails and they still keep doing it, and it's an obvious misuse of science, and they're trying to dupe people willingly and knowingly, then that's different. But I think you've got to have some criteria that you use to assess the degree of the offense.
Yeah, I've got a few points to speak on here. First of all, 100% agree that when people say it's a calling out in the form of an attack, we need to be very selective or careful in the way where we direct that attack towards the person versus the message that the person is sharing. For example, this is where I think lane has potentially crossed the line on a few occasions is where the attack shifts focus from the message to the person sometimes. And I've been guilty of this sometimes before, but I think I'm very cognizant of it, and I try to catch myself before I get too frustrated and start drifting towards the ad hominem. Like last night, I was a bit frustrated, and I said a comment like, "I'm sick of you fucking couch scientists." like you got to be careful in the way that where you direct things. But I also agree that we should be selective in who gets targeted. So, for example, someone who's got a couple of thousand followers and has aspirations of being a voice in the industry, but is very early on and probably hasn't sharpened their educational sword just yet. That's probably not the people that we should be calling out if they've made a mistake or a little bit of a blunder. But if we've got someone who's got thousands of followers with a big reach, and they are an unqualified, uneducated person putting out misinformation to the masses, then 100% be prepared to cop the fucking bazooka. Now, if you're not prepared to cop the bazooka, then don't fucking open your mouth and post advice, recommendations, or information on a public platform. Everything that I post, fair play, it's up for debate and up for criticisms, you know, like that is how social media works. And if you're going to get upset or offended from an attack that is on your message and not you as a person, then you're fucking delusional, in my opinion.
You're a sensitive little snowflake.
Yeah.
I also think the regularity of the misinformation is like matters, because and it's not so much intention, like, because I believe that these people think that, you know, maybe deep down they are helping out. Like not even the villains think that they're the villain, right? They think that they're justified in their actions. Goes back to what I was saying earlier. They think that what they're doing is right. But if they're always putting out information, and it's like, I think there's like got to be some sort of like natural process to how these people.
And it's also the degree of harm with that information.
Yeah,
like there's so many levels that you have to look at it on.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I also feel like the call out culture is more impactful when it's done less regularly. Like I think when somebody starts calling people out and that's all they do, right? Like that is, I think, a problem. It's like then they are assuming the role of you know, adjudicator basically of information and content, and it's like nobody is, you know, in that position to have that claim. I don't think. So I think it needs to be balanced. If you're going to call people out, I think that's fine. You have to go through it in the ways that we mentioned earlier, but you also have to balance that with putting out good information. You know, you have to also put yourself and your message across so that you can have other people, you know, criticize that and be open to, I guess, you know, discussion around your message, whether it's other people calling you out. You can't just be constantly calling people out and bashing other people. And it needs to be balanced with your own ideas, thoughts, and content that's positive. Like we don't need all this negativity all the time. We have enough with the news. It's like you need to be, you know, trying to care about your customers. You know, you need to demonstrate that you can use science correctly. You need to demonstrate that you're an expert and you're proficient and competent in various areas, and promote effective interventions and showcase your experience and knowledge as well. You can't just be bashing other people all the time. I think that's just bad for business.
A perfect analogy of that is, don't go telling people how shit their gardens are if you're not watering your own.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Very good. Very
last point on this, because I think it's important. Now, it's from a different perspective. So from the type of, and I have posted some call out videos recently. Now, the message within the call out videos could be delivered in a number of ways, and call out is one method of delivery, but I could have also just spoken the message and in very general terms. For example, let's take the Stairmaster example, and instead of using some of the information that the girl used, I could have just said, listen guys, trainers are programming your use of the Stairmaster with kickbacks to try and build your glutes. This is not the best way to build your glutes. This is how you should do it, blah, 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 blah. It would get 1/1000th of the reach that I would have got by using the call out element. Now, the message is the same, but if your message isn't getting in front of people, then what's the fucking point in posting it? So my conscience is clear if I toe the line a little bit in terms of maybe potentially some language that I use, or using potentially the call out delivery model. If I know that it's going to give me the best chance to reach the most people and therefore help the most people to get the message across. So I understand that a lot of people don't like my method of delivery with a lot of my content, but the fact is it's reaching the most people than ever before. And that gives me the biggest impact to help make a positive influence.
Yeah, and I think that's one, I guess, benefit to call out culture is that it's attention grabbing. It gets the likes, it gets the comments, the shares, and it engages a lot of people. Not only reaches them, but it engages them because you've got not only your own following that will probably engage, but this other person you're calling out, their following might engage, and it creates that discourse amongst a lot more people. But I still think that the way you go about it is hugely important, and you can't be attacking the person. As Jackson said, you need to attack the message. You need to have some form of, I guess, criteria or system to check who you're calling out, to ensure that the way you go about it is warranted, and that the quote unquote crimes they've committed are deserving of the level of, I guess, quote unquote punishment you are going to be giving them.
Quote unquote.
All right, guys. Well, we will end it there for today. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll chat to you next time, and make sure you like, comment, share, and spread the Gym Goss.
And keep calling people out.